2023 was such a good year for film. So many magnum opuses from various of the industry's best filmmakers, new challengers entering the ring, and some of the best films of the decade. What an amazing time. Okay, so yeah, 2024 was, pretty bad. I'd say it's next to 2021 and 2020 as the worst years of the decade so far. Simply put, there were weekends where nothing came out and I couldn't find myself enjoying the releases when they did come out. And you can tell as compared to my near 150 movie ranking in 2023, I only saw 110 this year. I mean, I guess you can't judge a year by the amount of movies that come out, rather the quality of those movies. Well, that was pretty bad too, thanks for asking. It just seemed nothing really noteworthy came out, even my favorites of the year seemed kinda obvious. I'm hoping 2025 will be a different case because it was pretty boring to keep pretty much knowing what my all-time favorite film of this year was going to be and such. It just felt like the others were obligation films. But I can't deny 2024 helped expand my horizons, and that's obvious because I won't just be doing this ranking, but I'm also going to be doing a video game and TV show ranking for this year. And the way this ranking works is based on what I give each film on Letterboxd. Xander Zandini, check me out. We start with the half stars, which I very rarely give out. Then we move on to 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, and 4. Alongside my highest rating, 4.5. I don't really give 5s on Letterboxd, sorry. So let's start this year right by sending last year off. This is all 110 movies I watched in 2024, ranked worst to best.
Shoot them with a dehydration gun!
Okay, so it's a bit of a tradition that I have to talk about just what makes a film my worst of the year. In the past 2 years I've done these rankings, they've been The Bubble in 2022 and Bezos in 2023. Joining my lineup of the worst films of the past years is truly one of the worst movies I've ever watched. Actually, I had two, but I'll explain. Can you guess what the worst film of 2024 was? It was Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. Look, you guys know I'm passionate about DreamWorks and their films. Such, when they decide to make something really lazy and incredibly dull, I call it out. But for the longest time, my personal worst DreamWorks films were the Boss Baby films, as I felt like they were just so batshit stupid that there really was nothing to them that made them interesting in any way. But what I find so interesting is that I don't have any, hatred for any of these movies. Even their worst have at least a little bit of family value, kids could still get into them. But man, that all changed in March. Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate is probably one of the laziest animated films I've ever watched. And as I mentioned, it's one of the worst movies I've ever watched in general. This is awful. I'm not even going to try to match the sheer unhinged lunacy that Shaft already had with his review, so I'll do my best to sum up what makes it so bad. I mean, well, look at it. The first film came out nearly 15 years ago, and somehow it looks miles better than this. Second of all, remember how many of those Disney sequels I talked about that felt like failed TV pilots for shows never picked up? Well, this one is a nightmare scenario that the awful show it was a pilot for ended up getting greenlit. Oh yeah, they made a show on this. Megamind rules. My TV ranking just got a lot more interesting, fellas. It's also just completely dumb. Everything it adds is just so lazy. The Doom Syndicate feels more like a video game threat.
And take down the Doom Syndicate.
Wait, hold this was a video game? Okay, yeah, the Doom Syndicate there is clearly a different Doom Syndicate, but really? They took inspiration from a tie-in game? The plot is also very stupid and jumbled. Dehydration gun, yeah. I guess I wouldn't mind this if the movie wasn't just so pompous to be like the second coming of Jesus just because it's Megamind 2. And the Over the Hedge video game is technically Over the Hedge 2. Nobody takes it as canon. This is a true mess, amongst the worst movies I've ever watched. And believe it or not, I have one other film to talk about that's in the same boat.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Thank God Sony's gonna stop trying to do these because they obviously have no idea what they're trying to do. Madam Webb is a hugely botched film that feels more like a film made in 2002 than a film about 2002. It feels like the script was just perfectly written at the wrong time, before people took superhero movies even a lick seriously. Dakota Johnson clearly tries to save this awful writing, but man, who the f*** is Madam Webb? That was the question I asked the entire time. Nothing is developed far enough for the film to be anywhere near interesting. With awful ADR voiceover from the villain, and I mean awful ADR. Terrible writing, god-awful effects. This defined Sony's flop of a cinematic universe, and we're not done with them just yet. And get this, apparently the Sony Pictures CEO said Madam Webb only flopped because of the press. Our Marvel movies are not terrible, it's the critics. So what about the reviews that get paid off? You could have easily paid these critics to say your movie was good, so if you have that much faith in people who, mind you, get paid to rip your bad movie to bad pieces, please don't blame the critics. As a matter of fact, Sony's blamed everyone except themselves for the bad film. They blamed Dakota Johnson because even the star ripped the movie apart. Sorry, I just saw that and I had to get that out.
Explosions!
Okay, so now we reach the 1 out of 5 tier, the films that are still pretty bad and some of the worst of the year, but not the worst of all time. And let's just say, this film rode the fine line. Borderlands is bad, man. It's one of those video game movies you can tell the most they did was Google Borderlands on Google Images. I'm convinced none of these writers or producers even looked at the basic-ass Wikipedia article on what Borderlands is, because even when they get it right, they get it wrong. The casting is obviously a big red flag. Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Black. Anything to get these people in the theaters, right? It didn't even work. The film bombed. I'm talking I had a little bit of hope with something they did at the end with Lilith. If you've ever played the games, this was a big thing regarding her. But even then, they messed it up and got it completely wrong. But above all else, the biggest annoyance with this film is Tiny Tina. She's played by, I believe, the daughter from Barbie. And she wasn't distracting there, but I really hope this doesn't ruin her otherwise aspiring career, because she was awful in this. I wanted to punch the screen every time she talked. She was just, wow, man. She had some of those what just happened dialogue. For some reason, the only thing this film did right was the style of Borderlands, and even then, it wasn't in the film nearly as much as it needed to be. This was a disaster true and through. One of the worst of the year, and amongst the worst video game adaptations out there.
Kalel, no!
Rebel Moon 2, Zack Snyder sucks, end of story.
I'm a little teddy bear.
Imaginary is a pretty dumb horror film that's only worsened by the idea of the director also being behind Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. Yeah, Blumhouse had a pretty awful year overall. Compared to the last year, they just didn't have that many hits, and this was the worst of their bunch. The teddy bear is at least a decent idea for a horror killer, and it plays around with the idea of being forgotten and abandoned, but nothing ever really gets fully expanded on. It sucks because I love the idea, but it's executed awfully.
Brand new bag for bro, but I didn't pay for it.
Man, I've discussed this movie 3 times now, and that's 3 times too many. I just don't want to do it. Look at these videos for more. Moving on.
Purple.
Hey Sony, you dropped your credibility. Man, everything I've heard about this movie, and somehow it's worse. I won't even say, how does anyone adapt a picture book? This isn't on the source material, it's on the filmmaking, and this is pretty bad. It obviously flopped hard, but found decent success over at Netflix. One of the biggest issues is Zachary Levi, and I said last year that he was also a problem in Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and I'm starting to realize it's just becoming hard to like the guy because he's the same goofball in every one of those movies. And while it's pretty hard to call this like all-time worst movie bad, it's still pretty bad.
Oh no! No.
Lift. Kevin Hart, I don't know, I watched this in Mean Girls in January, stop judging me.
Amira missed me.
You know that video I made on biopics and their dying art? This is why. Ronald Reagan? I guess the guy is pretty big. I mean, it seems like his story would be interesting, but it just seems kind of odd. I liked what Pharrell Williams did with Piece by Piece. I like the idea of what Robbie Williams is doing with Better Man. This doesn't strike me as a character that really demanded a movie. Really, if you gotta see this film and see the story of Ronald Reagan, I will give this movie that Dennis Quaid is almost uncanny as Reagan. He's really good. But other than that, this is pretty weak.
Don't you know? Hey, look at your face. You only shaved the right side of your face.
Rounding out my top 10 worst of 2024, it's... God damn it, I forgot he did that. Jerry Seinfeld's Pop-Tart movie. Do you think his agent's on suicide watch? Hey, Dave!
Yes, Jerry.
How's our numbers on Unfrosted doing?
Jerry, we've been over this. I have told you various times you are doing a Pop-Tart comedy film. I just need you to understand that. You got that?
Well, yeah.
The film bombed.
The world's gone woke! Too woke for comedy!
Jerry,
Seinfeld was a masterpiece!
Jerry. You made a Pop-Tarts biopic, alright?
There's a lot of people who would have loved a Pop-Tarts biopic.
On Mars, Jerry.
We'll make a Got Milk ad campaign biopic as a comedy!
I'm gonna kill myself.
This film is pretty bad, but I do give credit. I didn't really think about it after a week. It's just overall bad Jerry Seinfeld comedy, and, well, we know how common those are nowadays. If you like Seinfeld, well, that's about the only demographic I'm convinced would ever touch this film. Just like Jerry Seinfeld touches the line of the age of consent. Why couldn't Jerry say the slur on Laugh Factory Man? Nice person. Nice person.
Sorry, I don't open my door to strangers.
Congratulations to The Strangers Chapter 1 for breaking the top 100. There were only 110 films. Do not think that's suddenly an accomplishment. The Strangers Chapter 1 is just kind of lazy, but only because The Strangers is one of the most chilling horror movies of all time in my opinion. It seems like a watered-down, lazy adaptation of that story, even though the couple comes close enough to being interesting. Otherwise, not a big fan of this one. The last of our 1-stars, Atlas. J-Lo! I'm sure all 4 of Jennifer Lopez's fans in 2024 are devastated that this bombed on Netflix, but that's what you get when you do a movie that's just trashing AI and how bad it is, while also having that movie seem like it was made by AI. J-Lo's phoning this in, you kinda get the whole film in a trailer, and I hate that shit. It was just boring, and once again, lazy. I like the direction Humankind vs. AI stories are taking, but this just ain't the way to do it. You ain't Steven Spielberg's AI, J-Lo. You said it yourself, follow the leader.
Gentlemen?
Starting our 1.5 star rank, Argyle. I realize I've discussed my actual thoughts on this movie only once in the past, and it was in March, so I guess let's take a look and see if anything's changed in 10 months. Nope, Argyle is all over the place. While the plot is pretty cool, the story is jumbled and kind of confusing, throwing twist after twist after twist. I mean, when I thought the film was over, it throws a twist that somehow extends the f***ing film by 20 minutes. And talk about a wasted cast. Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Bryan Cranston, Henry Cavill. You couldn't convince me Samuel L. Jackson was in this. Nobody's given anything really to work with. So why not 1 star? Well, obviously it came very close to being a 1 star, but I do admit I really like the look of it. It's nice to see Matthew Vaughn establish a little style. But that being said, this is definitely messy.
How about another joke, Morray?
I hate this one. If I could put like actual personal worst and disappointment as reasons for a ranking, this would be way lower. But I admit it has very few redeeming factors, but not enough to save it. Above all else, the film completely misses what the first film set up. In a way, the people who made the first film have no idea why it had the impact it had. Does it make sense the director of the Hangover trilogy directed this? But Joaquin Phoenix desperately tries to save this obviously awful writing and the awful chemistry he has with Lady Gaga. But she's f***ing Lady Gaga, of course you can't have chemistry with her. Oh, by the way, it's a musical. Kind of a big deal, but the trailers didn't say it, so I will. Joker 2 is really bad, but I do agree it has just a few decent things. Do you think Lionsgate just said,
Alright guys, we got f***ing nothing coming out in August.
what about Borderlands?
We've got f***ing nothing coming out in August.
Oh, what about this? The Crow, we could reboot it, make it grittier and even darker than the original.
You're a genius!
How has Lionsgate not gone bankrupt? You get the problem pretty quickly. It's just not interesting at all. And worse, it completely tarnishes the legacy left behind by Brandon Lee, the guy who gave his life for the original film. It was his movie and Lionsgate tried to ruin that. It's pretty bad all around. I'd say the only redeeming factor is Bill Skarsgård.
I'm so dummy thick.
The only impressive thing here is that they made a sequel. It's better than The First Blood and Honey, but The First Blood and Honey was one of my worst of 2023, so yeah, not too big on this one. It's like Blumhouse likes to forget they made Insidious and then ruined it. Afraid is a dumb concept, but it's a lot more viable of a concept than Imaginary. Biggest issue, I'm not a fan of this AI plot. Damn, for the year that AI was such a big part of the industry, they sure suck at making it scary or threatening. Maybe one scene had me like, oh, that's pretty effed up, but the rest of it's just kind of generic.
I call it blunt marketing. Very blunt.
I am totally convinced the Underdogs only exist because somebody at Prime Video accidentally thought of the idea of Snoop Dogg as a football coach. It's funny that they have Snoop even playing a character. The film is called The F***ing Underdogs. There's 2 G's. This is obviously only marketed to Snoop Dogg fans, and it's overall a pretty weak sports movie. On the contrary, I do like sports movies, but it does take a specific sports movie, i.e., it needs to be something like We Are Marshals, The Remember the Titans, and this is more like Mighty Ducks. Mighty Dogs, I don't know. This was another one-time January watch. I'm moving on.
Swim!
So there are usually 4 very important movies that signify to me how the year will be. The first overall movie I watched of the year, the first film I watched in theaters, the last film I watched in theaters, and the last overall film I watched. Night Swim was the first overall in my first theater watch. I remember absolutely nothing about it. I probably was just looking for anything to watch in the beginning of the year, and yeah, that sums it up. Moving on.
I'm Steve.
Do people just forget Jack Black is Jack Black? I had very little hope for this streaming exclusive, but when I started seeing Jack Black acting, I kinda had a bit more hope for it. Not like super hype, but I like to think he's able to make most films funny, even if they're not inherently funny. 2024 should have taught me not to trust that theory. 3 different times this man's immense and massive talent has been wasted away by poor writing and nothing funny. Dear Santa isn't as bad as Borderlands, but the concept being, oh, this kid meant to write a letter to Santa, but has dyslexia. Man, who is writing these scripts? Also, haha, Jack Black, the kid has a Minecraft shirt on at the end. I see what you did there. You're reminding me that I'm probably gonna hate you in 2025. Come on, man, he's Jack freaking Black. Give him funny things to say. I feel bad for saying 2023 was his year, since he was one of the most iconic video game villains ever, and was subsequently the best part of the Mario movie. But the issue is, it's just not funny. Jack Black, the guy who practically defines a genre of comedy next to Jim Carrey, is given nothing funny to say. Truly a nightmare.
I kind of forgot I watched this. I'm sorry.
There's so much porn!
Oh yeah. Hey, Poppy. I watched it. This was a bit more recent, so I can at least talk about it a bit more than Incoming. But I remember about as much about Hot Frosty than I do of Incoming. And that I clearly was the wrong guy to watch this. It's pretty lame, a generic Netflix rom-com. I don't see why it was so heavily talked about. Maybe if I don't know, if I was a woman? I don't know how to talk about this one. I just remember Poppy recommended it to me, and I listen to my fans, damn it. Last one of the 1.5's Jackpot. Now I will admit, 2024 was the perfect year of movies I would watch one trailer for and say, oh f***, no. Transformers 1, Twisters, Wicked, hell, one of my top films of this year, which I won't disclose. But all of those movies I named at least cap the top 20. Yeah, all these movies, I'd look at the trailer and say,
I'd actually rather give money to watch Maroon 5.
And yet they were all huge surprises for me. I'd say that actually was the theme of the year, pleasant surprises. Films I thought weren't going to be that big and go nowhere, being fun and surprisingly great. That doesn't apply to Jackpot. I saw the trailer and actively said, oh no, and for the most part, I was right to be in that way. Awkwafina, as if I need any more reason to have trouble defending her. She is funny, she just needs funny writing. I'll die on that hill. Good example, Quiz Lady from last year. A highly underrated Hulu comedy with her and Sandra Oh. That was a good use of her talent. The Farewell, that was also a very unique use of her talent. But then there's this, Raya and the Last Dragon, as I said, a variety of animated films. And here, she clearly tries to make this obviously bad writing work. And John Cena had a better Prime Video film in March. I don't know, I don't think this is quite Unfrosted levels, but I still really didn't like it. Alright, moving up in the world, the twos. The films that are bad, but we're getting more to just generic bad. And starting off this year is Sony, it's been a good run, give it up. The started with the Spider-Man Rise debacle you clearly have not recovered. The funny thing is, Kraven took the longest to release. I remember initially it had like a December 2023 release, but then it got moved back to August 2024, and then back again to December of this year. And I mean, you'd think that the reshoots and all the reasons to actually delay this film would make it somewhat of quality. The brick wall isn't answering. Kraven the Hunter has that same awkwardness that the first Venom, and I'd say maybe Morbius had. It's not quite Madam Web cringy with its dialogue, but there's this one scene of Rhino just making a weird noise. Yes, that is the noise that this professional actor made in this film, and these professional filmmakers who get paid more than I do approved for this film of a $110 million budget. Money went into making this garbage. I guess Aaron Taylor Johnson fits a bit more than, say, Jared Leto or Dakota Johnson. He's kind of like Tom Hardy as Eddie, a perfect medium in a whirlwind of shit. The fact that I have to call Venom: The Last Dance the best Sonyverse film, hasta la D's nuts, Sony. Salem's Lot on Max? Man, I gotta stop watching movies I know I won't give a shit about.
Oh, hello, praise the Lord.
Not another church movie. I applaud any kind of spoof movie in the big 2024, but that's about all the applause this movie's gonna get. It's standard spoof bad, not like Meet the Spartans. It's kind of like on par with superhero movie. It's bad, but completely harmless. Tear-It? Dude, I gotta stop watching these low-grade horror movies. I will never forgive Apple TV for charging $7 to watch a Hellboy fan film. Who am I kidding? Hellboy fan films have higher production value than this. A generic low-budget film I'm not sure a lot of people even know about, but this was a talked-about release. A lot of big outlets discussed it, so yeah, I watched it and completely forgot about it. Moving on.
And I'm super with love.
Man, it feels like an eternity since I watched Mean Girls. I think that's a good thing. My thoughts on the Mean Girls 2004 movie are pretty mixed. I do think it's a staple of the early 2000s chick flicks, but I'm a dude, so obviously a chick flick wouldn't be my thing. That being said, I had intrigue with this being an adaptation of the Mean Girls musical, which I'll admit I wasn't familiar with when this film was releasing. Thankfully, my sister is a Broadway nut, so she was able to tell me, this movie sucks. I think the one thing I always heard, especially on social media, was that they changed the music. Well, that's normal. They have to adjust to the actors against the Broadway actors who could clearly make the original music work. But the biggest example of this movie's music issues was Stupid with Love. Now, watching this without knowing the original song, it's bland but fine. But then you listen to how Stupid with Love sounded in the original, and yeah, this sucks. They had to slow it down and make it a ballad because Andreen Rice, God bless her, obviously couldn't match the energy of the original. This just strikes me as a half-assed Broadway adaptation. I can't say it's quite as bad as, say, Dear Evan Hansen or Cats, but it certainly is a weird take.
Don't do it, Garfield. That's our pet dog, OD.
So the Garfield movie received pretty mixed reactions, and as I mentioned in my year in animation, I'm very split on it. Overall, I don't find it good, but I do find it fun. I think families will really enjoy the bouncy energy, but if you look too far into it, this really didn't need to be a Garfield movie. Chris Pratt is distracting as Garfield. The film is sadly the last to feature Angus Cloud of Euphoria fame. It's all over the place, but there is fun to be had. That's why it ultimately makes it to the latter half of the 2 stars, as it's not good, but there is just a smidge of charm in there. Horror movies have surprised me this year. They were able to take creative ideas and mix them with terrifying dread. And I kept hearing In a Violent Nature was in that boat. And at first, I was willing to listen. A horror movie told from the serial killer's point of view. That's a very different take. Too bad that's about as different as this film gets. Outside of one scene, I wasn't really too impressed with this. But the killer gets a good creep factor. It's not incredibly interesting story-wise, but if you judge off of just its kills, I'd say it's a bit higher. But I gotta judge everything, and only the horror element really works. The rest is pretty forgettable. M. Night Shyamalan, you sexy bastard. One day you can trick me into thinking, oh, things are changing in the Shyamalan sea. Knock at the Cabin was really good. And then you release Trap. Trap is overall not a great movie. Josh Hartnett is absolutely abysmal in this, and the twist just doesn't make sense. The only element I liked, as I mentioned in my video, is Shyamalan's daughter as the big pop star. She's actually really decent and seemingly is the only one giving a damn. If you're a diehard Shyamalan fan, you'll like this, but I can't see it getting anyone else's attention.
You hear about that killer they're trying to catch? The Weezer killer. That's why he's at the Weezer concert. Why ain't that just interesting? Hey, he's over here.
I paid $6 to watch Sasquatch's bang. Cool. Casa Grande's movie. I've never watched the show. So yeah, kind of confusing, sadly, but if you like the show, let me know what you think. Robert Zemeckis is like if Ridley Scott was younger and made Pinocchio 2022. I view Zemeckis and Ridley Scott on kind of the same view, while at one point they were unstoppable forces, somewhere to find the downward spiral. Look, anyone making movies since the 70s would have the same thing happen, but that is why so many directors might prefer having dips. Having a good track record ultimately can backfire if your movies are expected to be good. The minute Christopher Nolan or Robert Eggers make a bad movie, the world will stop, I mean it. That's what's happening with Zemeckis. He had such a great track record, you almost forget, oh wait, he doesn't anymore. Here is not his worst, but it's certainly forgettable. It's got a stupid gimmick where it's Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, and Robert Zemeckis reunited. Yeah, Castaway, whatever. I don't care, I talked about it already, but hey, I'm out of the 2s. The 2.5s, the film just cusping being okay, but having just enough flaws to keep them out. Drive Away Dolls is what happens if you take the brothers out of Coen brothers. Yep, this is only directed by Ethan Coen. And while it's not egregiously bad, it's not good either. The cast is, for the most part, wasted. It has a share of that Coen charm, but it's ultimately just a waste of time. I saw Mufasa on December 21st and then saw Sonic December 22nd, and clearly, I enjoyed one over the other. Mufasa is boring, man. What is up with Disney and thinking the reason we hate live-action remakes is just because they're shot-for-shot remakes of the animated films that already exist? I mean, that's part of it, but the other reason is that we'd prefer decent CG or even hand-drawn animated films. The problem isn't that it's live action, it's the fact that it's treated like a live action remake, where everything is just so grand and big, and oh hey, Seth Rogen as Pumbaa, get it? I don't. I guess it's cute that Beyonce's daughter voices Kiara. If you're gonna find anything cute about Beyonce and Jay-Z, I guess that would be decent. Okay, scratch that, that's the only thing you can say without bringing him into this. I found Mufasa just boring, an overall snore fest. And don't come at me with the music, it's ass. Kung Fu Panda 4 absolutely bombs as a Kung Fu Panda sequel. Though it has a decent animation and bouncing enough energy, a lot of the story just doesn't make sense. The villain is the worst in the series, and Zin's ass ain't even defined. I'm gonna get canceled for one game in my game ranking, by the way, I'm just letting y'all know. It's overall a pretty forgettable experience. What keeps it from being as bad as, say, Megamind 2, is there is some clear effort, and maybe every 10 minutes there's a good laugh. Something I failed to mention, the 3 times I've talked about this movie, I like the side plot with Poe's 2 different dads teaming up to go save him. It would have been easy for them to kill one of them off, but I'm kind of glad they just follow Poe and Zin. It's honestly really fun to watch. But the rest is pretty forgettable. I don't think it's awful, but considering it's Kung Fu Panda 4, I wish it could have been better. While Shyamalan himself did pretty mediocrely with his release, his daughter ended up releasing The Watchers. It's harmless. I hope she gets a better chance to show her skills. I do think the elements here are well done, they just need a better film. I trust her, we'll see where she goes.
You blew it!
Adam Sandler, you're lucky you have Happy Gilmore next year. Spaceman is wildly forgettable from Netflix, which, okay, it's cool to see someone like Sandler tackling a different genre, but it is ultimately too bland. Creature is cool, but not much else here. Come on, I need that Sandman magic. Spaceman, woo. Man, I was almost underwhelmed by Megalopolis, but for completely different reasons. I was underwhelmed by how nothing it is. This film is nothing. I thought, man, everyone hates this movie. Surely it's one of the worst. No, it's just a standard run-of-the-mill bad movie. I'm almost disappointed. I thought there might be something here that blows me away, both of how good or how bad it could be. But no, it's completely and utterly boring. Congrats, Megalopolis. This is the film I give the least amount of shits to.
What? Stop! Beast!
Jason Statham was in a movie and I completely forgot about it, so maybe there were some normal things that happened this year. The Beekeeper was one of the first releases this year, and it's pretty forgettable. Like most of the films in this tier, it didn't really leave enough of an impact, but neither has most of Statham's filmography, so nothing new here. A24 has had quite a year. There's a few I didn't get around to, like Civil War, and sadly I didn't get to watch The Brutalist, but for the most part, I did end up getting to watch a decent amount of their films, and was satisfied by the overall year they had. Not The Front Room, though. Once again, a purely bland horror movie, and Brandy just doesn't strike me as an actor, but I can live with this being purely just forgettable. Don't Move is sadly a good concept, bad execution. A film about a woman getting poisoned by a serial killer, and having only a given amount of time before that poison shuts her body down. But the film, God bless it, was a Netflix film, and I feel like that's like reaching into a bag and it's either candy or a mousetrap.
cuties!
But again, it's harmless and completely forgettable, so I can definitely forgive it.
Let me play among the...
I've discussed this film a few times, so I'll go with something about Fly Me to the Moon I haven't really mentioned yet. Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum have absolutely freaking no chemistry. I refuse to believe any chance that these two get together. And again, you know the rest.
Now what do you think?
You think I'm qualified?
Okay, so every year since 2022, I've had at least one movie that I call the Avatar 2 of the list. And the reason I call it that is, it's usually a film that gained decent reviews and is well liked that I didn't end up liking. Of course, this trend started with Avatar 2 in 2022, in 2023 it was Saltburn, and this year, it's Beetlejuice. I'll never hear the end of how my opinion is just so wrong, so let's just get it out there. Yeah, I didn't like this one. I thought the plot was too jumbled, it had to rely way too hard on Michael Keaton, who I will give does deliver as Beetlejuice, and the only other good thing about it are the visuals, which, yeah, it's Tim Burton, that's to be expected. But when I hear Beetlejuice 2, I want to like it, but it just doesn't strike me as the long-awaited sequel we've been waiting for. I've talked about it so many times, but just know it's at least the top of the 2.5 tier. Alright, so I'll be honest, looking into it, the entirety of the 3-star tier are films I genuinely do not want to waste my time with. That's the point of this tier, they're films that really didn't leave an impact either way. So let's speed through it. In order from 64 to 49. Red One, Despicable Me 4, Roadhouse, Self-Reliance, The First Omen, Bob Marley One Love, Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim, Venom The Last Dance, Orion in the Dark, Ricky Stenicki, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Moana 2, Smile 2, Speak No Evil, Terrifier 3, and Kinds of Kindness. A little on Kinds of Kindness, since I know I have a few Yorgos Lanthimos fans, this is the closest to bad his movies have ever gotten. And it's not even bad, it's just a bit jumbled and overall just okay. Quiet! Starting the 3.5 star tier is A Quiet Place Day 1. I've never been, like, an insane fan of A Quiet Place, but I acknowledge it did something very unique with audio. The problem seems to be that the sequel was considered good but not as good as the first, and this is still pretty good, but I definitely hope they either change it up or at least take a break from these movies. This one is easily the least interesting, but the concept is inherently really interesting. And give Lupita Nyong'o credit, she's somehow one of the only MCU actors who actually has tried with her career outside of the MCU. The rest is good, but it definitely rides the line of being forgettable. It's alive! I'm sorry, I really enjoyed this one. It's not perfect, but all things considered, I think it's weird yet very unique. The idea of bringing back a dead guy and you have to piece him back together by getting human parts is honestly very fun. And I don't give Catherine Newton enough credit, she's great in this. It's got its flaws, but I'm glad I saw it. No! If hate is so forced, man. People who hate this movie hate fun, I swear. Alright, that's not fair, but still, how did this movie bomb? It's so much fun, it's got a great cast behind it, it's got good emotion, yet some decent comedy. Steve Carell's kind of annoying, but I think that's the point of his character. I will say, I didn't see the twist coming. If you've seen the movie, you know what twist I'm talking about. But it's honestly insane. John Krasinski's Imaginary Friends movie had a better twist than the 20 twists in Argyle. If I had one issue with it, like an issue that really bugged me, it's that we don't really get enough time with the other ifs. It's mostly just Blue and Blossom. Like, they've got some really great names in this. Emily Blunt, George Clooney, Bradley Cooper, Matt Damon, Bill Hader. I think the one missed potential on this is that the superhero dog who's voiced by Sam Rockwell. And I mean, he's voiced well, but come on, tell me you look at this thing and don't think Bradley Cooper, who's on this cast. I feel like that would have been great casting. Also, I had no idea Christopher Meloni was this shadowy if. I almost couldn't tell. We got Law and Order in this bitch. That being said, the rest of it's fun. I had a good time. Hey, Guy Ritchie, good job. You didn't have an Operation Fortune this year. I wouldn't say Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare was a great movie, but it certainly was decent. The cast pulls their weight. It's got all the Guy Ritchie quirks you either love or hate. There's a decent amount of action and suspense to it, and that makes it really interesting. It ain't perfect, but I've got a soft spot for it. Apple TV can suck my scrot. This should have been a theater release. Wolf is a stylish, at times slow, but overall fun film. George Clooney and Brad Pitt have some decent chemistry. The story, like I said, is slow in parts, but I feel like there's enough where if this is your kind of thing, you'll definitely like it.
Keep fucking my wife's mouth!
I'm going to.
It's hard to watch Will Smith nowadays. I know, that happened in 2022, but I don't know, it's a bit difficult for me to fully accept him back in movies. With that, Bad Boys Ride or Die was wasted potential name-wise. They should have just called that the third movie and then this Bad Boys for Life. I'm a marketing genius, man, or I have an IQ that's in the double digits. Either way, this one's alright. I enjoyed Bad Boys for Life a little bit more than this, but I stand by this was one of the two things Michael Bay did right. And even though these two were from a different director, the choices they make, while not all perfect, have charms to them. I'd say I'd prefer 2 and 3 over this in the first film, but that's just me. Man, even A24's objectively worst film was at least fun. I'll admit I might be biased towards stoner comedies, but Y2K is really fun. Even with death not being taken that seriously, like there's a scene where this one guy dies and they try to give it some heart with another character, but it just happens so fast you almost think they're just trying to move past it. I don't know, someone's best friend's dying. But I'm gonna say, I am so happy filmmakers are seeing the potential in the late 90s, early 2000s. I'll never be able to say it was like the 90s overall, but this era had a vibe, man. Come on, Backstreet Boys, get with it. That being said, it's jumbled and all over the place, but I can't bring myself to hate it. I had fun. Side note, Kyle Mooney, if you plan to direct in the future, stop thinking you're talented enough to have a role in said films.
Fucking out of here!
This was one of the last films I watched this year, and I will admit I was a little late, but Thelma is a very charming comedy. June Squibb is always fun to watch, and the story just perfectly matches her. She's in the same boat as Betty White. Despite being older, she's able to have a lot of charm and fun with her performances. It's just a funny comedy. It's on Hulu as of writing this, so go check it out.
There's so much porn!
So my thoughts on the Ty West trilogy of X horror films is definitely mixed. I liked X, but not as much as everybody else. I enjoyed Pearl decently, and Maxine is a happy medium. Mia Goth is great in this as she was in the rest of the trilogy. It's not terribly scary, but it adds to an already great year for A24. And for me, while it's not my favorite horror movie this year, it's certainly decent.
Who are you? I am from ancient Greece.
Hey, Ridley Scott made a somewhat decent film, good job. Oh wait, audiences apparently didn't like this one from what I've seen. Oh, so when it's The Last Duel or Napoleon, I'm just wrong, I'm sorry. Gladiator II doesn't even come close to its predecessor, but it's the most fun I've had with a Ridley Scott film this decade. They do good at making each character either very likable enough to where their deaths hurt, or just despicable enough where their deaths feel so good. Either way, they leave an impact. They cleverly make Lucius kind of this middleman. You can't tell if you want him to win or not, he's kind of up in the air. Some of his actions should make him a villain, but with him literally winning his freedom back, you root for him as the underdog. It makes it so the only character you don't necessarily know your thoughts on is the main character. That's at least what I took from it. Other than that, yeah, it's long, yeah, it can be boring at times, but good job to Gladiator 2 for being better than it needed to be.
Oh, my golden ring, Santa!
Talked about this in my 2024 year in animation, and yeah, I gotta say, while I liked Locksmith's previous film, Ron's Gone Wrong, way better, I can't say this didn't deliver. I do probably argue it's tamer than Ron's Gone Wrong. I mean, that got tears from me, dude. Pretty hard to do that. That Christmas is a perfectly fine Christmas film. Like I said, biopics, be like Piece by Piece. The Pharrell Williams biopic told in Lego. That's a weird concept, but that's what will make biopics feel fresh again. Bohemian Rhapsody set the worst kind of precedent for biopics, and I swear it went downhill just more and more every year. Why in God's green earth would I give any form of a damn about the life of Marilyn Monroe? Maybe do something unique, then I'd give a damn. This is another one I've already talked about, so I'll move on, but I like this one.
Deborah bought 5,000.
Idiot.
Robot Dreams was the animated film that probably took me the longest to get to. And it had nothing to do with my interest in the film at all, I just kept forgetting to watch it when I had the chance. Well, I did just recently, and I will admit, I thought it would have been better than it was. That's not to really say it was bad, hell, it's in the latter half of the 3.5s, but when people talked about this movie, it was like a masterpiece, a modern masterpiece. It's good, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I will admit, the silent film approach was just as great as I anticipated. They do good to make the two main characters likable. And it's always nice to see 2D animation in 2024. So why didn't I love it? It's weird, but I feel like it's kind of too short. There's 2 or 3 scenes I would just kind of say, wait, it's over already? Maybe that's more of a pacing issue, but I found that the biggest thing that kind of threw me off. For me though, I really did enjoy this, just not as much as I anticipated.
I crushed the alien.
Disney's Alien is good. The world might be ending, Ridley Scott had a decent film, and Disney's Alien is good. I'm gonna fucking freak out. I guess the smartest move this film made was just getting the guy behind the 2013 Evil Dead. And even though that was a mixed bag for most, it's agreed he mostly knows how to handle older horror movie properties. And Romulus only continues that legacy. It makes me excited to see what's to come. I can't believe I'm saying that. Alien Romulus got me excited for more Alien. This sadly overlooked Eat the Rich story was a very unique take on the theme. Everyone pulls their own, and I'll admit, after 22 Jump Street, I didn't think it was possible to make me afraid of Channing Tatum, but here we are. There's nothing terribly special about it, but it works just well enough. So remember in my box office bombs of 2024 video how I said there was one thing that people were really going to hate me for over Furiosa? I may have overreacted because it's still not like 3 or even 2.5 rated, but I significantly liked it less than others. The biggest issue wasn't even Anya Taylor-Joy, she did really good here, she proved me wrong. But I hate doing this because I know he's got that whole early onset dementia thing, and I feel bad. I couldn't stand Chris Hemsworth here. Don't get me wrong, Mad Max is meant to be goofy and over the top, but I think Hemsworth is actually too goofy and over the top. It makes his performance hard to watch in my opinion. But the action is good, it's just Hemsworth being in it as much as he is really takes me out. But again, everything else is up to snuff for a Mad Max film. I recommend it. Hugh Grant is scary. I knew this since Love Actually. Hugh Grant is scary. Another W for A24. Heretic is another uncomfortable yet great experience with Hugh Grant as the shining star. I really hope filmmakers see the potential in older men being horror icons. This movie really made me afraid of Hugh Grant. Between him and Channing Tatum, I don't know which one I want to kidnap me. I'm sorry. I've talked about it before, but this film is eerie and uncomfortable, just how I like it.
You guys can come in, have a sip of tea, and watch Love Actually. It's a good movie. But no.
One of the festival films I got to watch this year, Kneecap is a unique story about the foundation of Irish hip-hop, with our titular hip-hop group as the center. I will admit, the reason this doesn't get into 4 out of 5 territory is because I am sick of dark comedy always translating to sex, drugs, violence. There's always something that can get a laugh without those things. But Kneecap is still a very fun and hype film for anyone interested. Man, I am so happy everyone who told me I would be missing out if I didn't watch Ultraman Rising did. Don't let the 3.5 rating fool you, this is the last 3.5 rating in the tier. I was tempted to give it a 4, and I'll explain why I didn't in a bit, but I will admit I'm not too familiar with kaiju, but they really do good at defining the characters, and the animation is really damn good. Okay, so what keeps it out of the 4 tier? Well, I'll be honest, I wanted more after the ending. I'm one of those guys who, if I'm not interested in a film and it's super long, I'll call it out. But if I'm into a film and it's super short, I'll also call it out. And this is just too short, man. Netflix, sequel, now. Or, whenever you can get to us, thank you. And now the 4s, the film that are amongst my favorite of the year. Starting us off is Woman of the Hour, Anna Kendrick's director debut, telling the story of real-life events around a serial killer being on the dating game. Now off the bat, this film has a similar issue to Trap. The killer's acting is so obvious and weird. How did anyone not pick up he's a fucking serial killer? But unlike Trap, everything else about the movie works incredibly well. Anna Kendrick is one of those actresses who can work with comedic acting like Trolls or Pitch Perfect, but also has good dramatic acting. Up in the Air is a good example. And she kills it here, it's a career high for me. It definitely starts the 4 tier, but it's good.
Bachelor number 1. What is the most important thing in a woman? Her organs. Damn it!
Man, I remember how Warner Brothers shafted this film hard, only showing it in like 50 theaters, not giving box office receipts. They must have had no hope with this film, despite it being from the legendary Clint Eastwood. So that gave me the impression this film wasn't worth watching. I forgot Warner Brothers is the company that canceled the 100% completed Coyote vs. Acme. This was great. Clint Eastwood nowadays seems to vary in his quality. He's not quite in Zemeckis Scott territory, but he has rough patches here and there. But this proves even at his age, he's still got it. I mean, he's been doing this forever now. It's nice to know, God knock on wood, if anything happens to him, this would be his big send-off. I personally hope he gets one last hurrah in, but yeah, this is great. Nicholas Holt's great. It's a bit too slow at times, but it's good. I liked it.
I want to ride my bicycle.
God, I shouldn't have taken so long to get to this one. The Bike Riders was supposed to come out in December of 2023, but was one of the many delayed films from the writers' strikes. Such, it released in June. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a decent flick. Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, everyone pulls their weight. It's fairly straightforward, but it's a decent time. Conclave. A24 continues their winning streak with I Saw the TV Glow. This is one of those films that's pretty good in the first half, but when the twist is revealed, it becomes immediately better. It's also uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable. The ending can get really tough to watch. And something I didn't mention in my review of the film is that the film opens a lot of discussion for its themes. Most notably, there's a lot of allegories for LGBTQ and coming out or being trapped, and I can kinda see that. I mean, I'm not LGBTQ, so I couldn't say for sure, but you can also view it as something with anxiety and feeling small in a big world. I do like that it opens multiple discussions, that's what makes it so interesting. So yeah, while the first half is good, when the twist happens, it grows to full potential.
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
I will say, Godzilla x Kong gives me hope for the future of the Warner Brothers MonsterVerse. The first few films were a mixed bag, but this one really gives me hope for the future. I think they can finally go forward with stuff that the other films kind of held back on. Sure, the humans are still the worst part, but when it's Godzilla and Kong being Godzilla and Kong, it's some of the best. Amilo Perez is my first foreign language film in any of my rankings, and it's fair for that. This was great. It was one of the festival films I wanted to catch, and I'm glad I did. A lot of great performances and a great story. Check it out on Netflix, it's pretty good.
UGLY, you ain't got no alibi, you ugly.
One of the last films I checked out, A Different Man, is another A24 film, and I gotta say, it's propelled by two great things, Sebastian Stan and Adam Pearson. I was aware Pearson had this skin condition or whatever, and honestly, it really works for the film. I'm not saying, oh, he should be typecast, but if this was just CG or makeup, the story wouldn't work as well. He's really talented, honestly. And Sebastian Stan is great here. I didn't watch The Apprentice because why would I? But he's really great here. A career high for me, honestly. Another W for A24.
He would be able to get away so much faster if he wasn't wearing old man shoes.
Just outside of our top 20 is Longlegs. I remember when this film came out, everyone talked about it like it was a masterpiece of horror. And yeah, I'd say if a horror movie makes me physically uncomfortable, I would say it did its job right. Osgood Perkins has another film coming out called The Monkey, and it just looks uncomfortable. Nicolas Cage is obviously the scene stealer, and if you've seen it, you know he plays the role of the Longlegs Killer really well. Definitely a highlight of horror this year.
And live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Okay, my top 20. Capping that is Saturday Night. I mentioned I was excited for this one multiple times, and I gotta say, it's delivered. Everyone is almost eerily well put into their roles, specifically Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd. You could not convince me the soy boy from Maze Runner is Dan Aykroyd, and the film surprisingly makes you care enough to where, I mean, you know the show succeeds, it got 50 seasons and went downhill dramatically, but it makes you question what happens. It's a personal favorite for me. Twisters was a genuine surprise. As I said when talking about Jackpot, there were several films that surprised me as I had very low expectations for them. But Twisters, the spiritual successor to a film that really didn't need one, was surprisingly fun. Fast-paced, straight up intense, the opening scene is ridiculously tense, and makes it so that even the characters you don't think you agree with, you end up agreeing with. For example, there's a scene where the main girl calls out the YouTuber group for taking advantage and selling merch in a bad tornado site. But then it's revealed that that was just part of the deal where they're also giving out supplies and food for free, and it suddenly makes you question the morals of our own main character. And yeah, Glenn Powell eats this role up, man. He's gotta have some kind of thing where if he's in sequels years after the original, it's immediately good. For what it's worth, I was pleasantly surprised.
Shadow, it's me, the devil!
My third favorite horror movie and one of horror's best years recently, Late Night with the Devil is a unique take on supernatural horror. A late night show haunted in its Halloween episode. The star of the show is David Dastmalchian, who is incredible in this. He is able to be so calm despite everything going on, it makes it just that much more disturbing. If you like supernatural horror, this is right up your alley.
Monkey?
Monkey Man works in very strange ways. Many say it's like John Wick with Hindu inspiration, and that's pretty close. Dev Patel is the highlight here alongside kick-ass, fast-paced action that keeps you invested. I like the way Hindu culture is intertwined with the story. It's a great film with kick-ass action.
The monkey chain! The monkey's fist!
The monkeys! Dude, I was not expecting to like this one as much as I did. I've liked the Planet of the Apes movies in the past, but I do admit they've kind of worn off on me. The effects always look gorgeous, but they usually sacrifice that for interesting stories. But thankfully, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes brings it back and makes it an interesting and even intense story. Alongside the occasional monkey noises, that made it really hard to take this movie seriously, but still. My favorite part personally was the villain. This guy is intimidating despite the fact that, like almost all the cast, he's a monkey. The effects in CG are gorgeous, and even if it's a bit long, I still really enjoyed it.
We're gonna go. The miners!
God damn you, Paramount. Last year you fumbled marketing for Under the Boardwalk, which, okay, it's not like anyone really had faith in it, but how do you fumble, no joke, the greatest Transformers movie since probably the original animated film from 1985? Like I've said countless times, the highlight here is the relationship between Orion Pax and D16. You can tell Orion wants to support and help his friend, but keeps getting away while D16 is tired of saving him. And something I never mentioned in the multiple times I've talked about this movie, Brian Tyree Henry is f***ing amazing as D16. This is harder voice acting than he ever had to give for this, and he is unbelievable in this role. For me, it's always going to be a shame that Paramount fumbled marketing this film so bad, and it's lucky it found life with this video's sponsor, Paramount Plus. I'm joking, but still.
Nosferatu!
The last film I saw in theaters, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. If it wasn't this, it would have been Kraven the Hunter. Oh no, the last thing we want is my last theater film to be Kraven the Hunter. We gotta do something! I'll be honest, I'm kinda mixed on Robert Eggers. Outside of The Lighthouse, none of his films even cap my top 10 of that year. He's unique and has a very interesting style to his films, but I think the best way I can describe it is that he makes movies for a different audience, and I'm just not in that audience. That being said, Nosferatu was pretty good. Compared to the original, it was made with a different audience in mind, but the scares and atmosphere make it a must-watch for horror fans. If I was more of a fan of Eggers' work, I'd probably put this higher, but I enjoyed it a lot more than expected. Luca Guadagnino's Challengers is a lot different from his other works, and for me, it makes it a standout in his career. I wasn't able to watch his other film of this year, Queer, as it didn't show in any of my theaters. But from what I saw in Challengers, I actually argue it's amongst his most ambitious projects. It is hard to make tennis interesting. The way the tennis scenes are shot makes it a lot more interesting. Also, Zendaya is devious for making the two best friends kiss each other. That shit was whack. That being said, Luca Guadagnino is a guy I often find myself mixed on, but one thing's for sure, he won me over with this one. Flow was a surprise watch, but I really enjoyed it. Coming at us from France, obviously a big highlight was the animation. It's gorgeous. But look, I built this film up a lot in my 2024 animation review, so let's talk about the two things that obviously kept it out of my top 10. Those two things were the third act and the animation. Now obviously, I just said the animation was gorgeous, but it almost looks too good, and this style is either your thing or not your thing, and while I loved it, it did kind of strike me as overdoing it. The more noticeable issue is the third act. There's nothing inherently bad about it, but if you've seen it, you'll know there's one thing in it that just drives me nuts. And I won't spoil it, but you'll know it when you see it. But it's nitpicking, and I ended up really enjoying it. I'm glad I got this one recommended to me. Look Back is a short film on Prime Video, and I argue it does better at telling a story in a short amount of time than even some of these feature-length animated films. Hell, this is 4th place in animation. It's odd to me that it does so much in so little time, yet it totally makes sense. Everything works out really nicely, and I found it just a cozy film, which is why it's just outside of my top 10. I like the movies that were able to challenge my perspective on film, but that's not really to discredit this. Thank you to the guy who kept persisting that I check this one out. I really appreciate it. Now, Memoir of a Snail was my last official film of this year. I legit watched it today, like I was writing this. And considering my last film of 2023 was, yeah, this was way better. Memoir of a Snail is from the same guys behind Mary and Max. Mary and Max is one of my favorite all-time animated movies. And while this doesn't really reach that level, I'll admit it's still pretty damn good. I like the soothing narrator. I've never really seen her other work, but she does really good at soothing the audience despite the harsh subjects at hand. While I liked Mary and Max for tackling Asperger's and loneliness, something I get with anxiety, there's still some really great topics covered here. It legit was a damn good film despite it being the first film since Mary and Max done by this crew. And I'm glad to end this mediocre year on it.
We're taking the bus!
Inside Out 2 is another great animated film that I've talked about too many damn times. But still, it's one of my favorite Pixar films since probably Soul. The way they portray anxiety yet don't have her be a villain, showcasing how these different emotions work off each other. And of course, my biggest problem with the film, the anxiety attack scene. I give credit, the way they show it internally with anxiety is really well done. That being said, I've discussed it multiple times, you guys know I love it, so let's move on.
And if I'm flying so...
Wicked, our last film of the 4s. Man, I was not expecting to like this movie. With the poor conditions surrounding it, a god-awful press tour, and I mean it, one of the worst I've seen in a while, some pretty poor behavior from the lead, all of it doesn't matter, this blew me away. Cynthia Erivo does amazing here. Defying Gravity was a beautiful song to end on. You immediately believe any chemistry between Elphaba and Galinda. I like that there's a few things going on, yet it's also focused. And they do really good at making every character incredibly well fleshed out. Only one performance didn't really hit me, and that's Jeff Goldblum as the Wizard. He isn't awful, he's just Jeff Goldblum. But man, everything is great here. Amazing. Now we have our last tier, the top 7, the 4.5s. I don't give 5s on Letterboxd, Andrew Sandini by the way, but 4.5 is pretty much perfect in my judgment. These 7 films were my favorites of the year, and how kicking us off is Hundreds of Beavers. If it weren't for Shafrillas, I wouldn't have even known this existed, but no joke, it's one of the best comedies of the year. The best is tough, but it was able to get so many laughs without even saying a word. It's funny, dumb, and all in between, one of my favorite comedies of the year. My favorite horror movie of the year, The Substance. And this movie made me realize I've never given a horror movie a 4.5 until this very moment. Demi Moore is an absolute mastermind here. She really deserves any acting award she gets for this. She's amazing here. I should mention that this is body horror, so if you're not into that kind of thing or if you're squeamish, be warned of that. But this is a film that truly transcends body horror for me. It's a highlight for sure.
Well, thanks for filling in for me. You're going to make a great Fall Guy.
Okay, so back in my first year ranking in 2022, my number 2 film was Bullet Train. Well, 2 years later, David Leitch returned with The Fall Guy. Based on a show I haven't watched, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt lead this one. And man, it was fun. With a lot of great action scenes that know how to seriously take themselves, a both believable and baffling romance between Gosling and Blunt, fun car chases, fun action, good humor. It's a full package. I do think Bullet Train was a more interesting story, but I have no problem saying The Fall Guy is a must-watch.
I come to make an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog's a bitch-ass motherfucker.
Hell to the yeah. Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Take that, Disney. That's what you get for releasing Mufasa. I know I'm going to get shit for even considering this in the top 10, but I have had very few films where I was just smiling the whole way through. This is a love letter to Sonic fans. Keanu Reeves is amazing as Shadow, and even though I doubted at first, he really fits the character, and I can't wait to see more of him. Jim Carrey's a highlight as always, and it's cool to see him always come back for these movies. And I'm going to say it, they did really good at making Tom and Maddie more likable. They nobly cut down on the human characters. Hell, Wade is only in one scene. But hell, even Commander Rockwell, who's played by Jessica Jones herself, isn't even in it that long. But they did really good at making us care about the human characters we did get. But because Jim Carrey plays 2 Eggmen, Egg Dick, it makes him a personal highlight. One of the things that really propelled me with this, though, is the fact that I saw this with Gabe and Archer. Archer is the little brother of Connor, who I talked about in my last video, and all Archer said was Connor would have loved that movie. It really put things in perspective, man. I mean, I'm sad that he never got to see it, but I'm glad I got the chance to see it with someone like myself who was deeply connected to him. I don't dare spoil the end credit scene, but Sonic fans, be hyped, we're getting somewhere. Since the first 2 were pretty much inspired by Sonic 1 and 2, with 1 being more of a road trip buddy film than anything else, and this being based on Sonic Adventure 2, I wonder what the 4th film will be. Logically, it would be Sonic Heroes. Yes, please!
Oh well, Sonic, it seems you've been trapped by my super laser piss. Eggman, you're too late. I posted your nudes on Twitter.com.
You know how long I've been waiting for this?
Taking the bronze of 2024, it's Deadpool and Wolverine. After the abysmal year Marvel had in 2023, and Sony's multiple muck-ups this year alongside DC not even trying, the fact that my third favorite film of 2024 is a comic book movie is a damn miracle. But I do think that this is also a love letter to the Fox movies, the X-Men movies, the Fantastic Four movies. And they cleverly make it so that Deadpool finally has something to care about, his family. And we have a Wolverine who's a lot more tragic than before. It goes without saying, some of the reveals here are mind-blowing. A minor spoiler, so just skip ahead a bit, like one skip ahead on the YouTube player. Chris Evans is in this, and you think he's Captain America, and they really set that up until he says flame on, and that's the first big laugh I got in the movie. Everything else is fun, raunchy, and hilarious, exactly what you want in a Deadpool movie.
Swim!
The Wild Robot. Man, this was a good thing for DreamWorks. Despite their other blunders this year, The Wild Robot was just a highlight. Beautiful animation, great characters, a likable character with Roz. Everything about this brought me right back to the days I'd watch How to Train Your Dragon with my parents. Hell, this was directed by Chris Sanders, who was a co-director on How to Train Your Dragon. He also directed Lilo and Stitch. He's a damn mastermind, man. I've gone on and on about this film. It's one of my favorite DreamWorks films. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So close to my number one. But what is my number one? It could be anything. It could be Dune 2. It's Dune 2. I saw this on the last day of February as a Thursday preview, and somehow in 9 to 10 months, I didn't see anything else that even came close to the massive event that was this film. Sure, Wild Robot's beautiful, Deadpool and Wolverine is hilarious, Sonic 3 is hype, but nothing came close to this because it felt the most like a huge event film. Everything worked just beautifully. Also, side note, the Oscars for not considering Hans Zimmer's score since it uses tracks from the first Dune movie. Y'all nominated John Williams last year for Dial of Destiny. In the same situation, y'all didn't nominate the Spider-Verse soundtrack, so suck my dick. But the story, the characters, the drama, the action. I think my favorite part is that Paul Atreides and Zendaya don't really get together. It's kind of left open. And I really do like that. You can tell this is a movie where things are going to change drastically. For whatever comes next, we'll be sure to let that knife chip and shatter. And that was my 2024 ranking. If y'all guys like this, please subscribe and let's make 2025 a great year.
And now to play us out the entirety of KSI's Thick of It.
Turn that shit off!